The rain had been falling for hours, turning the cobblestone streets of Savannah into rivers of reflection. Inside the old White House on Whitaker Street, Elise waited. The dinner on the table had gone cold. The candles were only pools of wax, and the clock on the wall seemed to mock her with every tick. Outside, thunder rolled like a slow heartbeat fading away, and the swing on the porch moved on its own, creaking in rhythm with her breath. He had promised to come back before the storm. He never did. When dawn came, Savannah woke under a pale mist, the kind that made the city look like a painting left out in the rain. Elise stood by the window, one hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, the other on the wooden frame, cracked and old like her heart. The house felt alive, whispering the memory of footsteps, the ghost of laughter, the scent of a man who had vanished into the night. She told herself she would not leave. Not this house, not this city, not the story that had started here, because even if love leaves, its shadow stays behind, and sometimes, from that shadow, something new begins to bloom. Savannah had a way of keeping time differently. The air was thick with the smell of rain and moss, the sound of cicadas echoing from the live oaks. It was a place where stories didn't end. They just faded, waiting to be remembered. Elise's story was one of them. A woman who built her life around silence and stayed long after love had gone. Before we begin, if this story finds a place in you, if you still believe that love can come back even after everything, hit like, subscribe, and comment the city and state you're watching from. That's how I know where these stories are finding their way. Years passed, but the house remained the same. White shutters, peeling paint, and a front porch that faced the river like it was waiting for something. Elise turned her pain into habit, her loneliness into ritual. Every morning, she baked bread for no one, cleaned rooms no one entered, and spoke to a man who would never answer. Until one spring, when a stranger arrived in town, a carpenter with tired eyes and hands that carried both ruin and redemption. He came to restore the house, but what he didn't know was that the house wasn't the only thing in need of rebuilding. The carpenter's name was Daniel. He arrived on a Thursday morning, the kind of morning when the fog still lingered low over the river and the city felt half asleep. His truck stopped in front of the house, its engine humming like a tired animal. Elise watched from behind the lace curtain, her heart steady, her face unreadable. For 15 years, no one had touched those walls. Now someone had come with nails, wood, and purpose. Daniel stepped out, ran a hand through his damp hair, and looked up at the old structure. The porch was sagging, the shutters crooked, and ivy had claimed most of the south wall. Yet there was beauty in its decay, the same kind of beauty that clung to Elise when she walked barefoot through the hallways at night, tracing the cracks in the floorboards as if they were the lines of her own story. He knocked once. The sound echoed through the house, long and hollow. She didn't answer right away. Part of her wanted to pretend no one was home. Another part longed for a voice that wasn't her own. When she finally opened the door, Daniel saw a woman that time had both hardened and softened. Her eyes carried storms, but her smile, faint as it was, carried dawn. "I'm here about the restoration," he said, his voice calm, careful. She nodded. "The house needs more than wood," she murmured, "but we'll start there." He unpacked his tools in silence. The smell of sawdust soon filled the rooms, blending with the lingering scent of old bread and dried flowers. Elise watched him work from the staircase, her hands folded like a prayer. There was something about the rhythm of his hammer, the focus in his eyes, that reminded her of a time before everything broke. As days turned into weeks, the house began to change. Walls were stripped, colors reappeared, and sunlight found new paths through the windows. And somewhere between the sound of sanding and the whispers of memory, Elise began to breathe differently. She caught herself humming, just once, a tune she hadn't sung since the night her husband left. Daniel noticed. "That song," he said one afternoon while fixing a window frame. "I've heard it before. My mother used to hum it." Elise froze for a moment. "It's an old hymn," she said softly. "About finding home again?" He smiled. "Just barely. Seems right for this place." Every conversation was short, cautious, like testing the temperature of water before stepping in. But little by little, words turned into trust, and silence became something they shared instead of feared. One evening, The power went out during a thunderstorm. The house glowed only by candlelight, and Daniel found Elise sitting by the piano, her fingers tracing the keys, but not playing. "It doesn't work anymore," she said, half smiling. He knelt beside her, pressed a single key. It made a dull, broken sound. "Then we fix it," he said, "like everything else." And for the first time in years, Elise felt the smallest flicker of warmth, not from the candles, but from the simple truth in his words. Outside, the storm raged on, the same way it had the night her life had fallen apart. But this time, she didn't close her eyes to shut it out. She listened, and beneath the thunder, she heard something she thought she had forgotten. The sound of hope quietly knocking again. By summer, the house no longer looked abandoned. The fresh paint glowed in the morning light, and the porch, once broken and uneven, now stood straight and proud. Daniel spent most of his days there, fixing the railing, sanding the steps, talking little. Elise began leaving water and bread for him by the kitchen door. It wasn't hospitality, not yet. It was gratitude that didn't know how to speak. One afternoon, while clearing the attic, Daniel found a wooden box beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bound together by a faded blue ribbon. Each one was addressed to the same man, her husband. The return address was the same, Whitaker Street. None of them had been sent. He didn't mean to read them, but his eyes caught a line written in trembling ink. "I still bake the bread you liked, even though it always burns without you." He closed the box, placed it back exactly where he found it, and for the first time, he understood the weight of silence that filled the house. Later that evening, Elise noticed the dust on his hands and the quiet in his face. "You found something," she said, not asking, just knowing. He looked up. "Some things are too heavy to throw away." She nodded, her eyes soft. "Some things are meant to be kept until they stop hurting." After that day, Daniel treated the house differently. Every nail he drove in, every board he replaced, felt like an act of care, not just repair. And Elise, watching him work, began to notice small things. How his shoulders relaxed when he laughed, how his hands paused before touching anything fragile. As weeks turned to months, people in town started to notice too. The neighbors whispered that the widow on Whitaker Street was smiling again, that her house had come back to life. Savannah has a way of carrying gossip like pollen, floating, settling, sprouting. Elise ignored it. She had learned that happiness, when it finally returns, doesn't need to be defended. But life, even when it blooms, carries shadows. One morning, while Daniel was fixing the fence, a letter arrived. The envelope was damp, the handwriting unmistakable. Her husband's name. Elise froze, staring at it as if it were a ghost knocking on her door. She didn't open it right away. Days passed with the envelope lying on the kitchen table, moving from corner to corner like a piece of evidence she couldn't destroy. Daniel noticed her growing distance, her eyes turning inward again, her laughter vanishing mid-air. Finally, one night, as the cicadas screamed outside and the heat clung to the walls, she opened it. The letter was short, a confession, not of love, but of regret. He was alive. He was married again, and he wanted forgiveness she didn't owe. She read it twice, then burned it in the sink. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. When Daniel walked in, the smoke still hung between them. "It's done," she whispered. "Everything that was holding me here is gone." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. He simply stepped closer, his hand brushing hers for the first time. The touch was light, almost accidental, but it carried more truth than any words she had heard in years. For a long moment, they just stood there, two people bound by broken pasts, both learning that love sometimes returns wearing a different face. And outside, Savannah slept under the weight of summer heat, unaware that inside that white house, a heart had finally opened its windows again. Autumn came quietly to Savannah. The air turned cooler, and the scent of rain gave way to dry leaves and chimney smoke. The house on Whitaker Street, once a monument of grief, now felt alive. Elise began planting small flowers by the porch, while Daniel rebuilt the back steps where the wood had long rotted away. They worked side by side, saying little, but their silences no longer felt empty. They were full of something unspoken, something both were afraid to name. One evening, Daniel brought over an old record player he'd found at a flea market. "Thought this place needed music again," he said, setting it down gently on the kitchen counter. When the first crackling notes filled the air, Elise froze. It was the same song she had danced to on her wedding night. The sound filled the room like a ghost, tender and cruel all at once. Daniel saw her eyes glisten and reached for the dial, but she stopped him. "Let it play," she said softly. "I don't want to run from it anymore." They listened together as the melody unfolded, slow, haunting, and filled with memory. Halfway through, Elise began to hum. Then, almost without realizing, she took his hand. They moved slowly, her head resting against his chest, the rhythm of his heartbeat louder than the music. For a few minutes, time disappeared. The ghosts of the house seemed to fade, the walls breathing quietly around them. It wasn't passion, not yet. It was healing disguised as a dance. When the record ended, they didn't speak, they just stayed close, because sometimes silence says everything. But love rarely comes without consequence. The next morning, as Daniel worked in the yard, a black sedan stopped by the gate. A man stepped out, polished shoes, pressed suit, and eyes that carried arrogance like a weapon. It was Elise's former husband. The past, it seemed, had found its way back to Savannah. Daniel stood still as the man walked up the path. "You must be the help," the stranger said, glancing at the sawdust on his shirt. "Tell Elise I've come to take her home." Before Daniel could answer, Elise appeared in the doorway, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "This is my home," she said, "and you're standing on my porch uninvited." The man laughed, that cruel, familiar sound that used to make her flinch. "Don't do this again, Elise. You belong with me." "No," she said. "I belonged to you once. Now, I belong to myself." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Daniel took a step closer, not in threat, but in quiet defense, a wall she didn't have before. The man's smirk faltered. He muttered something under his breath and left, his tires hissing against the gravel as he sped away. Elise's hands were trembling, but her eyes were steady. She looked at Daniel. "I've waited 15 years to say that," she whispered. He didn't reply. He just nodded, and in that small gesture was everything she needed: understanding, respect, and safety. That night, Elise sat by the window long after the town had fallen asleep. She watched the river glisten under the moonlight, thinking about how love used to mean surrender. Now it meant choice. And though neither of them said it aloud, both knew something had changed. The air between them was different, charged, fragile, real. The past had returned, only to finally release its hold. Still, as every story in Savannah teaches, peace never lasts forever. The storm always waits just beyond the horizon. Winter crept into Savannah like an old memory. The nights grew longer, and the river fog thickened, wrapping the city in silence. Inside the house, warmth came not from the fireplace, but from the small routines that had formed between Elise and Daniel. Coffee brewed before dawn, quiet dinners at the table that had once been set for someone else, a single lamp burning late into the night, while they talked about nothing and everything. But peace has a way of revealing what's still broken. Daniel had started leaving early, spending hours by the river after work. Elise pretended not to notice, but every creak of the porch told her when he left, and every gust of wind told her when he didn't come back. One evening, she found him there, sitting on the riverbank, staring at the current as if waiting for something to float by. "You're miles away," she said softly. He didn't turn around. "My daughter used to love the water," he murmured. "When she was 6, she called it liquid sky. She drowned 3 years ago. That's why I left Atlanta. I thought fixing other people's homes might fix the part of me that still listens for her laughter." Elise stepped closer, her heart tightening. She had known pain, but not like that. "You can't fix what the river takes," she whispered, "but you can build something on its edge, something that still hears her name." Daniel's shoulders trembled, and for the first time, he cried. Not loudly, not in shame, just quietly, the way men do when they've held it in too long. Elise didn't say anything. She simply sat beside him, her hand finding his. No promises, no rescue, just presence. From that night, something changed. The air between them no longer felt careful. It felt honest. They shared their ghosts instead of hiding them. Elise told him about the baby she lost months after her husband left, about the nights she slept beside an empty crib and pretended she still heard breathing. Daniel told her about the guilt that haunted him every time he touched water. Two broken souls, trading fragments in the dark. Days passed, and the town seemed to watch them. Savannah, with her knowing eyes and quiet streets, had seen many loves born from sorrow. People whispered again, but this time their voices carried warmth. The widow and the carpenter, the house that came back to life. But fate wasn't done with them yet. One afternoon, while Daniel was working on the roof, a storm rolled in faster than expected. Elise shouted from the porch, but the wind swallowed her words. A flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a crash of wood and metal. When she reached him, he was lying still, rain pouring over his face. Her world stopped. She pressed her hands to his chest, calling his name again and again until he opened his eyes. "I'm fine," he whispered, breathless. "Just caught my balance wrong." But his voice shook, and she could see pain beneath the calm. That night, as she tended to his bruises by candlelight, Daniel looked at her with a softness that didn't need language. "I didn't think I'd live long enough to feel safe again," he said. "You're safe here," Elise answered. "You always will be." And for the first time in both their lives, those words felt true. The storm outside faded, but the one inside them had finally passed. Spring returned to Savannah like forgiveness. The trees outside the house unfurled new leaves. The air smelled of jasmine, and for the first time in years, Elise left her door open to let the breeze in. Daniel's laughter filled the rooms that had once known only silence. The piano, now repaired, stood proudly in the corner, its wood gleaming beneath the morning light. Sometimes he played simple tunes while she painted on the porch. Small moments, ordinary and sacred. The townspeople noticed the change. Children passing by would wave at Daniel. Old neighbors brought pies and stories. Even the mailman, who had long avoided the eerie quiet of Whitaker Street, now lingered for a chat. The house had gone from haunted to holy, its cracks now veins of gold in a story of survival. Yet, love never arrives without a test. One evening, Elise received a letter from a lawyer. Her ex-husband had passed away suddenly, leaving behind a will that mentioned her name. It wasn't money, just a deed to a small cabin by the coast, the same place they had once dreamed of retiring together. The past was trying, one last time, to pull her backward. She spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Daniel's soft breathing from the next room. When dawn came, she stood by the river where everything had begun and burned the letter to ash. Watching it rise into the pale sky, she felt something inside her finally loosen. The weight, the guilt, the need to keep the past alive. When she turned, Daniel was standing at the doorway. "You're really letting it go," he said. "I already did," she whispered. "Now I just need to learn how to live again." He smiled faintly, walked to her, and took her hand. "Then let's live," he said simply. That afternoon, they threw open every window in the house. The scent of magnolias drifted in, and the curtains danced with the wind. Elise placed a loaf of bread in the oven. This time, she didn't mind if it burned. Daniel tuned the piano, striking each key until the sound carried through every room. As the sun set, they stood together on the porch, looking out over the river. The sky was painted gold and rose, the same colors of the day they met. He wrapped an arm around her, and she leaned into him, her eyes closing in peace. Savannah held its breath. The ghosts were gone, the house no longer empty. What remained was something quiet and whole. Two hearts rebuilt, side by side. One nail, one word, one forgiveness at a time. And if you passed by Whitaker Street on a warm evening after that, you might hear music drifting from the porch, laughter mixed with the sound of crickets, and the creak of an old swing moving in rhythm with the wind. The empty house of Savannah was empty no more. Love does not always return the way we expect it to. Sometimes it wears a new face, speaks with a softer voice, and finds us long after we've stopped waiting. Elise and Daniel didn't save each other. They rebuilt what life had broken. Together, they proved that even after abandonment, loss, and pain, the heart remembers how to beat again. Hit like, subscribe, and comment the city and state you're watching from. Because somewhere, someone is still standing in the rain, waiting for a door to open. And maybe, just maybe, this story will remind them it's never too late to go home.